I'm Graham Baston, a member of the Victorian Hunter Education Committee. The idea of this video is to give new and maybe not so new hunters a rundown on the actual field dressing and basic butchering of deer, game animals that they may take in the field. The animal we're going to use in this video will be taken out of the bunyip sambar enclosure, which is run by the Australian Deer Association for study purposes. This animal is a hind about 8 years old. Because the animals breed in the pen, we have to take animals out to maintain a steady number that the habitat in the pen can maintain. Our animal's down. She was taken with a spine shot on the other side. Went down instantly. That's the entry of our hole. There is no exit. The reason we come up and touch the eye is because that's one of the last reflexes that goes. There's no reaction on the eye. The animal is considered completely brain dead. Now we've got the job of gutting the animal out and removing it from the bush. First thing we're going to do before we gut the animal is to open up and remove the back passage, preferably without slicing into the where it all comes through. You can start by making an opening around the edge. You have a feel it's fairly obvious where the passage is. You've got to keep right to the outside edges of where the passage comes out, to try and avoid cutting it. Not a real drama if you do happen to cut it at this end, because the pellets are fairly dry and solid and they're not likely to contaminate too badly anyway. Work our way all the way around. Which go in probably 100 mil or so. You should be able to give that a bit of a wriggle and get it to free a bit. That's sort of freed up and we can get it to come out a bit. That's got that back end sorted. Now we've got to open the animal up. Now we're going to open her up from the udder through to the back end of the rib cage where the brisket comes in. You can feel the point there where you've got bone and you've got the actual lining in above the paunch. Now we'll always work with the knife blade out, from inside out. That way you're not cutting through, especially on stags, you're not cutting through mud and stuff, and your knife will stand it a lot better. I'll just open her up back here. Now some of the hinds, well, often the hinds you take will be carrying a fetus. Some will be in milk. This one's got a very little bit of mammary gland there. Nothing too much to panic about. And the hinds may be carrying calves at any time of the year, pretty much. Step her up a bit. As I said, we've got where the rib cage comes around the end of the brisket. I'll start a bit forward of where that soft point is, because I know here I'm not going to touch the paunch. That just gives me an opening on the skin. I'll just open the skin up. Without actually going through the stomach, the actual lining. Now this is where you got to be a bit careful as you come through here, not to hit the paunch. Now at the end here we've got a cartilage-like structure. Work your way in under that till you get 2 fingers in there. And then we'll go with a knife between 2 fingers. That way I'll protect the point. I don't have the point of the knife protruding past the back of my fingers. That'll avoid puncturing the paunch. If your knife's properly sharp, this is not an issue. Now this animal is carrying a fairly large fetus, that be it. In the hunting environment, extremely difficult to tell whether the hinds are carrying fetus or not. Now we've got the bulk of that out. There's the paunch I was talking about. That's where all the bulk of the grass and the feed it's been taking in the last few hours will be. Get what we can of that out of the road. And I'll try and remove this back end. And that's basically it clear there. Now there's a fair bit of blood in this animal's body because it was neck shot. The blood has all stayed within the animal's body and veins, etc. So as we go and we cut through major arteries and veins, we're going to find that's all still there. A shoulder shot animal, where the bullet's taken out heart, lungs, most of the bleeding will be internal, and if you get a good exit wound, they'll lose a lot of the blood externally. Michael, can I get you to hold this leg for us, if you wouldn't mind? This is where your hunting mates come in handy. His radio wasn't flat, so he's silly enough to turn up. Now at this stage I've got to get up inside the chest cavity to remove the diaphragm, which is here. You can see the liver, large organ there. As I said, we're dealing with a fair bit of blood here already. You can see the diaphragm runs around, roughly around the line of the ribs, back ribs. You've got to get in there and cut that away to allow the heart, lungs and the windpipe, etc. to come free. Leaving all your fingers intact. This is largely done by feel, and it's probably going to be pretty difficult. It's difficult for me to see. So. Just congealed blood. Now we're to reach forward, as far forward as I can in front of the heart, lung, and try and cut the esophagus windpipe off to free the heart, lungs. Once again, largely, well, it is all done by feel. What you're looking for up in the front there, it feels like a piece of Aggie pipe. That's the esophagus we've got to cut off and tip the lungs out. a bit of other connecting tissue in there that a bit of a tug will help pull clear. And then the diaphragm on the bottom side. That's a lot clear. Now this animal, the bullet has actually passed through the back end of the lungs. That's got quite a lot of blood in here, which is perfectly normal. Basically that's the animal clean. Now we sort of try and tip that blood out of there and deal with that as best we can. Go over on it with a belly a bit and get that to drain out. Should remove most of it. Not looking too bad. Now if you're really fortunate enough to have the animal near a tractor somewhere, you could retrieve the carcass whole. But we're going to demonstrate a method of dividing the animal up so it can be carried out in back legs. And first thing we've got to do is remove the gut to a suitable location. We don't leave it laying around in the bush that may offend others. Best thing you can do with it is to bury it. It can be a bit of an issue at times, but you may be able to find a disused wombat hole or a soak or something, not a soak, a bit of a crevice somewhere, and poke it in it and at least cover it up. Now we're talking about removing the animal. If you're close to the camp or on a downhill run, and this is a reasonable size animal, but a smaller animal, you can take them out by dragging them by the head. You don't drag them backwards because the hair will catch on everything you drag and creates a fair bit of resistance. I always carry a piece of cord in my pack. Just a matter of making a little loop. And put it around the bottom jaw, back behind the teeth. Pull that up, and you can drag them reasonably easy out of the bush, providing you haven't got too far to go, or there may be 2 or 3 of you to do it. That's one method. Now the other thing we'll do, we can take them out, take both back legs out in one piece. We'll take her off across and just take the back legs out for carry out, and I'll demonstrate that. In the back end here, there's a joint where basically the pelvis meets the spine. We'll trim some of this fat and veinous material away here. We'll find the joint, it's fairly obvious to see, along the spine. And you don't need saws and things to break these animals down. It's about there. You'll see the white connective tissue. Now if you take that right through, that will break away fairly easily, and that'll allow you 2 back legs which can be carried over somebody's shoulders. The other section, you remove the heads roughly the same weight. You haven't got too far to go, and you're feeling that way inclined, it can be removed like that. But today I'm going to demonstrate removing the legs separately from the carcass and basically boning it out. But the very first thing we do in here, we're going to remove the eye fillets so we don't cut them to bits. Now there's a bit of fat in here still. I'll trim that back to expose them a bit more. And there's the eye fillet running inside the spine either side here. It's not a huge cut, but it is considered probably the best cut on the beast. So we find the centre line of the spine and follow it down. It comes fairly well back. And practice will help you with this. You'll learn where these cuts are, but that'll come out fairly cleanly. Goes to about halfway along the body. There it is there. That's one eye fillet. Now in my, I also carry as a cloth bag. Yep. Always carry these. It's a little calico bag. Pop them in to keep them clean. I'll do the same with the other side. And there's the second one. Now the reason I use cloth, this animal's, like it's been, we've taken it less than 15 minutes ago, it's fairly warm. If you put meat in plastic it will sweat. Now those smaller cuts are going to go into another pack to be carried out anyway, and they're best kept in cloth so they can breathe and not sweat. Now I'm going to remove the back leg. That's straight down the middle, right to the bone. Through to the back end. There's almost a dividing seam in there, you follow. Right through to the pelvis. And we'll follow that pelvis around. Stay down on the bone. Through the joints. Right at the top end of the pelvic bone, you can see the ball joint there. I've just opened the outer side of it to let it go. We'll work around through the back of that and back down the pelvis. Now the pelvis actually falls away quite sharply towards the centre line of the back. If you cut straight through you're going to leave some of your rump behind, so stay in hard over the back of the pelvic bone and you'll recover most of your rump fairly well intact. Now the other thing we're going to do here is get rid of that. Now if this hind had more milk I would have already removed the udder because it will sour. There's enough there to probably be a problem, so we'll remove that. We don't need to be carrying that out of the bush either. It's extra weight. By the same token, we won't remove any more skin than we have to, so we're not exposing too much of the meat. Around the front of the pelvic bone there, comes a little ways forward. And up through the flank. Once again we work from the inside out so your knife won't blunt quite so quick. Now around here we've got the pin of the hip. We're going to come around to that and then back round towards the tail. Around to the centre line of the back. And cut right through the skin the whole lot. And remove the whole leg. And the leg ready to be carried. Now the other thing I also carry is pillow slips. They are very good. Now my able assistant Michael here's got one ready for us. We'll just slip that straight into it. There she's away from the flies, any contamination, and that can be either slung over her shoulder to be carried, as such. Pretty comfortable load, and away you go. Otherwise it can be put into a backpack, and if I was going to do that, a full-on backpack, that leg would be sticking up above your head and can be a bit of a sod, especially if you're in a bit of thicker cover. So I'll remove the hock. We don't actually cut it down here right through the joint because we want to maintain the tendon for the purposes of hanging the animal later. Now, this joint's fairly tight and it's basically an immovable joint. Now if you run your fingers down, you can see a swelling on the bone. Well, it's right about just above where the swelling of the bone starts out. What we're looking for can be fairly difficult to break. And just work our way in around it. That's the skin off. Once again, we just got to find the seam. It can be tricky to find. And cut through the tendons, etc. And we should be able to break that with a little bit of luck. Over your knee. Now you can see where that broke. It's not down on the joint as such. It's fairly low down. A little bit of fiddling and you'll get most joints on an animal off without too much pressure or prying with a knife. You work on joints, you just don't need pressure that'll bust knives. Now that's ready to go in a backpack. Now we'll move on to a front leg. And we'll hold the leg up and we've got the soft skin area under here. We're just going to work our way through in there for a starter. Through the skin we've got a layer of muscle. We go through that and we're into a layer of fatty type tissue between the rib cage and the actual leg. That's what we're going to follow around. Come reasonably well forward to the neck. Right around the back, once again to about the centre line. That's our front leg removed. This one hasn't got a lot of bruising on it, so very little bit there. But if an animal was shot through the centre of the shoulder, there'd be considerable bruising on that. On a long carry out you may consider trimming that and disposing it with the gut rather than carry out damaged meat. Although if you do carry it out, your dogs at home will appreciate it. Once again covered to keep it clean. Now to remove the hock off the front leg, it's pretty simple. Just find the centre of the knee. You can feel a depression across the front of the knee with your finger. That's the main part of the joint. In through there, all the way around. This knife work may look a bit awkward on this. It's simply because I'm trying to work with a camera and I wouldn't normally work the knife back towards myself at all. It just eliminates the chance of a slip and a long limp out of the bush. Once again, a bit of fiddling, you'll find your way through the tendons without excessive force on the knife, which will keep it going a lot longer for the duration of the cutting up job. There's another one ready to go. Now we've got to remove the back strap from this animal. the front end of it's going to be damaged because that's where the bullet came through. It's a 180 grain Game King. That's came through the spine, and you can fair idea of the bullet damage you're going to get. Now, there's bound to be chips of copper and lead amongst that, not to mention bone and stuff, so be a little bit careful making use of that area of the animal. First thing we've got to do is get rid of I'll skin this back down past the back strap. Down through that flank skin. We'll just skin that back. Now I've gone a bit past the centre line of the spine, which is down here. You run your fingers down there, you'll feel a row of bumps on the top of the actual spine. That's what we're looking for. Now you can see this white covering on the back strap comes around to about yay. We're just going to come in through the top edge of that. You can see the top edge of the muscle there now. Follow that pretty well, that line right through to the base of the neck. We'll take that flank off over what they call the short ribs. And we'll just start the top edge of that back strap there. Just run in here, we've got the ribs running down. We'll take the knife in onto them and follow them down into the spines. Now back here we've got the short ribs, and you'll have to feel the end of them with your finger. You can feel them in there, just in under the edge of that. There's basically the pointer one there, you can see. Same again, we'll work in onto them and follow them down to the spine. Right back to the pin of the pelvis. Now, right in on the spines. Now we're going to find the top edge of the spines there. There's a reasonably solid sinewy layer there. I'm going to run the knife along that. And keep your blade down a bit, and you'll run in onto the edge of the spines a bit like you've done with the ribs. There's a thick sinew that holds the neck up. Well, most people call it the paddywhack. Just work our way back. To where we took the back leg off. And once again all the way down until we meet the ribs. It's quite deep in here at the front end. Just lead up your two cuts over the heads of the ribs. The last bit off the top of that pelvic bone. There's a beautiful back strap. Now later on when we're actually butchering this animal, we're going to start referring to, we'll call it back strap, but basically it's your porterhouse and your Scotch fillet. Porterhouse will come off the back end of the animal from roughly the rib cage forward would normally be your Scotch fillet that you'd buy in your butcher shop. But it can be treated all the same, so that's the way we'll carve it. once we've hung it for a day or two. Right, now we're going to take the meat off the shoulder. That's largely used as mince. It's well worth the effort taking it out. Now notice so far I've worked all off one side of the carcass. Everything's kept clean. When we tip, by the time we finish this side, there'll be nothing left to be worried about getting dirty. We'll tip her over, remove the other side, and there shouldn't be any real reason you'll get any of it too dirty. And once again, it's skin off the rib cage. There's a very thin layer of muscle just under the skin. It's fairly hard to leave on the carcass, but as you get lower down it gets quite thick. That's where we'll go through it and leave it behind. Just down around the brisket, to about the centre line. Hit the back of the neck. Skin on the neck is very thick, and on stag it's worse. Can take a bit of getting through. Surprising how much meat will be on the neck, especially on a mature stag. I'd have a stab it could be up to 15-20 kilos in the neck alone with the bone in. And it all makes perfectly good mince and small goods if you want to go into that. I'm going to start down the midline where I left off on the back strap. There's a fair bit of damage just there. I just might cut that away straight away. Set that aside. Back over the ribs and follow the surface of the ribs down as we go. You see that okay? A bit fiddly down here because of the vertebrae of the spine is fairly uneven. Just a matter of working your way around as best you can. Back around to the centre line. And basically we'll skin the cover off the ribs. And we keep the knife blade pointed down a little bit on the ribs and just follow them down. It'll come off reasonably clean. Now we've got this the flat back here that's hanging loose. We'll follow the last rib down and take that off. Careful not to drop that if you can help it. It's a bit of a slimy handful. As you can see, with a bit of cleaning up, it's quite a good bit of prime mince to be had in that. Let's hold another bag and in you go. That's got that side of the animal pretty well cleaned up. We've just got to roll her over and basically repeat the process on the other side. Now once we've taken the rest of the meat off the carcass, we've got to deal with the carcass, and we suggest you deal with that in a similar manner you've done with the innards of the animal. Leaving nothing in sight too much to cause offence or feed wild dogs, etc. Now this is fairly typical of the damage you're going to have from, although this was basically a spinal shot, typical of the bruising and damage you're going to get. That's quite a bit of bruise down through the tissue in this other side shoulder. It runs quite a way back into over the animal, but most of that there will just trim off, and what's beneath it's perfectly okay. We've still got a reasonable amount of damage there to deal with, but as I said before, bear in mind there's going to be lead and copper around these wounds, and you probably don't want to be eating it. And the jelly and stuff, we can clean that off, can be dealt with when we actually do the cut up. When we hang this, a lot of the blood will drain out of it, and most of it will clean up quite well. The bigger calibre rifles go a bit harder, you'll get more bruising and the hydraulic effect than that. Right, we're back at home in this case. You could be back at camp, wouldn't matter. Now what I'm going to do here is just skin back the hock a little bit, just enough to expose the back tendon, so we can insert a hook. You can just put it straight through now, but you find after it's hung, it's a bit hard to skin it with a hook in the road, and especially once it's set a bit, it's a bit of a chore. So I find it easier if we just skin back this very first bit of the hock, just enough to get the hook in. Allow it to be hung, and then when you do come to actually to do the breakdown of the hind leg, which this is, we can just go straight through and skin the leg and hang it, put the hook in like such. Use a piece of cord or whatever, and that's out of the road. And we won't skin the rest of the leg at this stage because it just exposes the meat to the air, and it tends to dry out a fair bit. Now the other thing I'm going to do, because I'm at home and I'm about to put this in a cool room, I'm going to remove the pillow slip that we've carried it out of the bush in. Now I'm going to cover the exposed meat area. This is just an opened up freezer bag. I'm just going to stick that on there because this will hang for about, well, I usually hang them for 10 days, but it depends on what you've got to hang them in, whether you can do that or not. And that exposed meat there will dry out a fair bit, and you end up having to trim a dry skin off the outer surface of it. So by doing that, I've sealed it up, keep the air off it a bit. It can still drain any excess blood or anything out the bottom, and it'll save a bit of trimming when we actually do the cut up. Now we've got the whole front leg here. This one we're still with the shank on. Now we just carry it out like this for a hanging point. We're at the back of the leg. We just put the knife back down between the tendon and the bone. Just make an incision, and that can have a hook or a cord or whatever poke through behind those tendons to hang. Now in my case, in my cool room, it won't fit in this way, so we remove the bottom half of the leg. Just remove the hock, pretty much as we showed in the field. a bit of a fiddle and work our way down through the joint, cut and sinew only. Now for a hanging point on this, it's at the front of the leg, above where we just removed the joint. So once again there's tendon there, we'll go through there, but again, before I do that, I'm going to just skin it back enough, and mostly around the front where I want the hook, so we can get the hook through without having the skin on the hook. So when it's hanging and I'm actually breaking the leg down and skinning it, I haven't got the hook in the road to contend with. You can see the white tendon running up the front there. I'm just going to push the knife through between it and the bone, and then the hook goes. Cord or whatever you fancy to use. There's a hanging point. I'll quite happily hang that without any drama. And again, I will cover that exposed meat area with a bag to stop it drying out in the cool room. Cool rooms do run very dry air, and they will dry it out quite a bit. In a bush situation, or you're not hanging it too long, I wouldn't bother. It'll only be 2 or 3 days and you'll have to prepare it for the freezer anyway. Now this is what I use for the cool room. It's actually an old drinks fridge or a pie dispenser from a business I bought years ago. And a drinks fridge from a shop would be ideal. Just big enough to hang, it'll hang a whole animal cut neatly in two. In this case we've got all the cuts hanging quite well. Now this will run at about 2 degrees and we'll hang this for, because I can, for about 10 days. If you haven't got the refrigeration, best you'll do in the winter, you might be able to hang it for about 4 days. Up in the bush, if it's nice and cool, you'll hang it for 4 days without too much trouble, just allow it to age a bit, and then you'll probably have to process it and get it into freezer. The other thing you can do is break it down into the major cuts, which we're going to show, and it can be placed in a refrigerator. I'd probably once again put the cuts into freezer bags or something so they don't dry out, and it can be aged in a normal fridge for a further 3 or 4 days, even a week, to allow it to age, and then actually slice it into the various finished cuts before it's frozen for storage. Now, there's a bit of basic gear we're going to need for butchering the animal. Some stainless steel S-hooks we use to hang the animal, and the various cuts, pretty handy though, they can be the hardware store. That's a small boning knife, that does a fair bit of the breakdown of the animal. Skinning knife, these are all basic stuff that a butcher would use. A large staking knife, sharpening gear, stone and a steel, labels, these are just self-adhesive labels I write on to label the cuts as they go into basic freezer bags. That's just another arrangement for dispensing labels, quite handy. Here I have a homemade brine pump. Now we're going to demonstrate pickling the cuts would normally be corned meat. When it comes off, you can buy brine pumps. Anything that will inject liquid will do the same job. And the large chopping board. I also have, which we won't need for this particular job because of the way we've broke the animal down as a meat saw. If I was doing fallow deer or the smaller animals, I would use that to break it, because largely you bring them out whole. You break down the middle of the backbone. That would be used for cutting likes of T-bones or chops if you like. Right, as I said, we've aged this. This is the back strap, and I think the fillets in this bag been aged in the bag straight as we took it out of the bush. We'll stick a bit, but it's kept it relatively moist. The bags can be soaked in cold water with a bit of salt and they'll clean up just fine. relatively cheap to buy anyway, the pillow slips, so we'll just set that aside. Now there's our back strap. As I came out of the animal, and our fillets. As a fillet, it's just a matter of slicing that into steaks. Now we always cut across the grain on any of the cuts. Now the grain runs generally the length of most mussels. And if you look carefully, you can see the grain running lengthways in this. It's just a matter of slicing this into steak. There's a little bit of trim off the end. I'll set that aside. I've got a bucket down here for the hot cut for the mince. It's just a matter of slicing them into steaks. We don't cut it too thinly for frying steaks so it doesn't dry out when it's being cooked. It's a matter of running that into little, very small medallions. Lovely little cut. Not a lot of it, but it's highest quality. Easy as that. Now we'll run that into a bag, whatever portions you feel you require. Now when you're freezing meat, you should try and exclude as much air as possible so you don't get freezer burn. Just tie the top and we're in business. Now the labels, I'll write the label, haven't as yet, but I'll just demonstrate. I'll write the labels out on half of the label, and I like to flag them around the top of the cut, top of the bag, and there's no way that'll fall off in the freezer. If you stick it on the bag, sometimes they'll fall off, and you've got a mystery bag. That's that one. And the same again with the other. If you want to go to the effort of getting trays and seal it up as you would have supplied in the supermarket, you can do that too, but I find this is quite adequate. Now we have the back straps to deal with. It's all fairly clean. You're going to get a little bit of hair etc. on it from being dressed in the bush. It's a matter of removing some of that. This one's pretty good. The more care you take in the bush, the less you're going to have to do here. Now we've got a little bit of fatty tissue there, just on the inside of the cut where it was laying along the bone. I'll just trim that off. That's got that looking pretty good. This tail end we've got a few odds and sods. Once again we'll just prune it up. All these pieces will be set aside to go into mince. A little bit of sinew. This is the narrower end of the back strap. This is the front end, which would normally be your Scotch fillet if it was beef, and we'll still treat this pretty much the same. Trim off a little bit of excess fat. This animal's in pretty good condition. Then the little leftovers of bush dressing. Now what I'll do here, you've got this white sinew, quite heavy on the outside of the back strap. I'll cut it through in half about where the thickest of that starts, and we'll remove that. Now I'll put that down on the chopping board with our staining knife. Now I'm going to start about halfway along that cut. We go through to the sinew without going through it. We'll get ourselves near the edge of the bench. Carefully through, and work the knife down roughly flat, and we'll peel that off, largely off those cuts with the porterhouse. We've mostly got rid of that in one hit. Now we usually remove the meat from the sinew, not the sinew from the meat, as what I've just shown. In this case, this last little bit, we'll do it the other way about. You can just slice it, leave this on if you like, but I find the finished product better if it's taken off. It doesn't take much effort, and a little bit of practice you'll get it quite cleanly. We'll repeat the same for the other end of the piece. Lay the knife relatively flat to the board. That's mostly gone. A little bit of trim again. That's ready to be sliced. That's just simply sliced. Once again, not too thinly. This, like I said, would be a porterhouse. In the steaks. You could leave it in a piece for roasting, but there's plenty of other cuts on the animal for roasting. Once again, I've cut it across the grain, which is across the length of the piece. And the same with the other end, we'll just trim off this bit that's dried off the end. I probably wouldn't put that in mince, it's a little bit dry. There's not much of it. That'll go to the side for the use for pet meat. Once again, just simply slice her up in the steak. Now that can be labelled as backstrap, porterhouse, Scotch fillet, it's all treated the same. Grilled or fried, if it's a bigger, older animal and you're a little bit concerned about the eating quality of it, it could be stewed, casserole, ideal in a camp oven. Now we'll just repeat pretty much the same procedure with the front half. Once again, I'll start about halfway along. A little bit of fatty tissue here which comes up the side, I'll just peel that back. So it will lay flat on the bench. Once again, start about halfway along. Keep the fatty bit under the blade of the knife. And remove most of that drier outer coating off that cut. Turn around and repeat the other direction. A little bit of trim, we've got a little bit of drier surface there we'll remove. Once again, just slice it into probably about 20mm thick slices would be good. Tail end trim for a bit of mince. Little trim. A little bit more time spent here, like I said, improves your eating quality of your cuts later. Top eating grade steak. Right, now we've got the hind leg off the animal, fresh out of the fridge. First chore we have to do is to actually remove the skin. Better running the knife up under the skin. Without getting too far into the meat if we can. Let's work that skin back off without taking too much meat with it if we can. Game meat and venison is, unlike beef and lamb, the skin is very close. There is very little fatty tissue between the actual meat and the skin. And we'll find it can be a bit difficult to get it off 100% clean without taking a little bit of meat with it. A little bit of pressure, and we pull out as we go. We open up what fatty tissue is there, and you'll be able to make your way down through it without leaving too much behind. This is a little bit awkward working for the camera. I wouldn't normally work towards myself like this with a knife, but for the purpose of the video it's a bit hard to do otherwise. I'll just work down around the edges. Now we hang the venison with the skin on to stop the meat drying out. Because it's such a low fat meat, it will dry out quite badly if you scun the animal and then hung it. That's the reason I put the bag over it to hang it in the fridge to age it. Beef and lamb with the fat in it doesn't dry out anything like it as bad. Yeah, over that side. And this is rather awkward, but once again, I'll peel this other side back. I suggest you don't work this way yourself. Not terribly recommended. Work to whatever's comfortable. Now I'm not a trained butcher or anything. I'm actually a motor mechanic by trade and since taken up running the family farm and agricultural contracting. But being on the farm, we've always killed our own meat. I'm basically self-taught. I've watched butchers at work and you pick this up as you go. Now once we've cleared it around the hock and mostly around the edges, you can give this a bit of a pull and it will, to some degree, pull off. Just run the knife down to help it along a bit. It helps a fair bit when you're skinning deer. If you can hang them, whether it's whole carcass or the cuts, because as you work away, and especially on stags that have been lying, the dirt and hair and stuff will fall away rather than be on a bench or wherever you're working, you end up stuck all over the meat, which then once again you've got to try and clean off. So it's really worth the effort to have somewhere to hang them to do the job. Let's got that away reasonably clean. Now the skin, you could cut that into bits of squares. If you hang it somewhere to dry in the sun, and instead of buying dried and smoked pig's ears and things for your dogs, they'll chew on that quite happily. The hair is actually quite good for their internal workings as well. Now that's the leg scun. This animal, like I said, wasn't quite fat. It's not usual to find salmon with quite this much fat on them. Depends on the conditions and where they've been living. A little bit of hair about it from where it was field dressed. Fairly good. Now I'm going to trim a bit of this fat off. And if you had the exposed areas were a bit soiled, this is the stage where I clean them up. A little bit of trim will go into mince. You'll find a few little odds and sods where it came off the carcass, come off the front of there. Once again, there's a little bit of hair etc. on that there. This is where keeping it clean as it comes off the animal and getting it into those pillowcases pays dividends. That's not looking too bad. Now the first cut I'm going to take off it will be the round steak, which comes off the front of the leg, this being the outside of the leg. This is basically the knee joint. You can see the white cartilage through here with the knee, and the seam that runs down either side for this joint comes right to the bottom of the, or top of the leg, being the bottom at the hock. And once again around, down, through, in behind here. I'll just remove this bit of sinew and I'll show it a bit better. The seam comes down, around through, and behind here. However, we're going to start at the top right at the knee. We're going to come in on the cartilage in here, in onto the knee joint. We'll work our way in with the point of the knife. We'll basically find the knee cap. There's the leg bone, bottom end of it, which runs right through to the ball where we removed it off the carcass. There's the ball in there, it runs through down in here. I'm just going to open this back a little bit carefully. Now we'll pick up this seam, just open it up not too deeply through that surface material. A little bit of pressure with your thumb, you'll find that seam quite easily in there. Runs back up to the side of the joint. Peel that open. As it comes down. That runs right back into the bone. And once again the same the other side. A little bit of fiddling, you'll find that seam. This one runs back in on an angle in behind the top side, which is on the inside of the leg. We'll just work our way in. There's the bone. Work our way around it a bit. As we come down, that seam becomes fairly evident. You can see the surface of the inner part of the top side. It's not as clean as the other. Now what I'm going to do, there's the kneecap. I'm just going to put a hole through there with a knife. I'm just going to insert a hook. We get a much better grip on it. We've got the fluid out of the knee is actually quite slippery and there's less chance of me dropping the cut. And a little bit of pressure, we work our way down around that bone. The seams largely let go themselves. It's quite evident the seams in either side of the cut. Right down the end of the bone. A little bit of pressure and it'll come away. Here we have what we call our round steak. That's how she comes off. I'll just set that aside. So the next cut we'll take off will be the rump, which is basically what's left hanging here. So a little bit of trim here. If you get bits and pieces, doesn't matter, it all goes into mince. Now what I'm going to do with that is basically take it off at right angles to the rest of the leg. Just way straight through. And that will be the rump. There's not a lot of it. Again, deer are just that way. They just don't have a lot of rump. Once again, we'll set that aside. Now we'll take off the top side, which is on the inside of the leg. This is where it was. We took it off around the pelvic bone. And once again, it's basically following seams. Come up through the, fold the bone up. This comes off up a bit higher. There are a couple of layers of this. A little bit tricky finding the seam there, but just above the knee. Going through the outer layers. We'll work our way in and find that seam in there. Fairly easy to find once again. Now this is the top side. The remaining muscle will be gravy beef or shin meat. Now we're going to pick up this seam down the back that runs down between the two joints. You can see a different colour and sheen in the meat. If you look closely, you can see the white grain running up what would be the tongue of the silver side. Now we want to leave that connected to the main piece of the silver side. And the silver side is identified by the long, you can see the long white grain in it, which runs across. The tongue runs more up and down the leg. We're going to pick up this seam and open it up. To separate them. Once again, you can get your fingers in there and pry this apart. It becomes fairly easy to follow the seams between the cuts. And that once again, that'll go right in onto the bone, and again I'm going to make a bit of a hole there to insert a hook. Put your finger through it, whatever you fancy, just makes it a little easy to keep a grip on. Goes right in onto the bone. It comes away quite easily with a little bit of pressure and knife work. And around the end of the leg bone there. That's our top side. We'll sit him aside. Now we'll remove what is the silver side. We've got the bottom end of the shin meat. Just work up around in behind that. Once again down into the bone. Through the little thin layers of sinew around the back end of there. Round to the knee. That'll come away from the bone fairly quickly. That's the silver side. Basically in two parts. The bigger animal, that second joint will be a fair bit larger obviously. And we're left with the shin meat, which can be boned off the bone pretty much any way you like. But I'll start up here. The bone runs down to the knee. I'm just working around the back of that. And as we go, now I won't cut the hanging tendon until the last thing if I can help it. Just makes life a little bit easier to get around it. I find it easier to work it off hanging on the hook rather than on the bench. Get in behind the bone, follow it down. Direct from the bone. a reasonably heavy sinew around the joint to work through. Once again, this is a little bit awkward working with the camera. Peel that tendon off. There we have the shin beat off the bone. About finished with that, so we'll set that aside as well. So these cuts can be sliced and dealt with as you take them off the leg. It's really up to yourself to decide on that. I generally, as I've just done, bone them off and deal with them separately. A little bit of trim there. And deal with it in the same order we took it off the leg. We've got the round. Now this just wants a bit of a trim up, remove some sinew, etc. From the outside, a little bit of a clean up. A little bit of fat and stuff to remove. Or anything that might happen to be soiled. Now we're going to remove this outer layer of sinew. You can leave it on if you feel you want to. I just think it gives a little bit better finish. It's not very hard to remove. Peels off relatively easy. We just work our way down a bit like we took the skin off. Work our way down through between it and the skin. Now there is another smaller muscle on the front of the round, which is the front back end of the flank. We'll just take that off with this outer layer. It'll just come off. There's quite a evident seam between it. If you're going to use this for a roast, you could leave that on. The round does make quite a good roast. My preference is for a steak, and I use it. You can use it as snake, but I like to slice it thin and use it as a schnitzel. Comes up very well. A little bit of trim on the end. I'll go into mince, and that could be cut into whatever portions you like for a roast. It come up very well. As I said, I'll slice this into steaks, in the round steak. Now this, because I schnitzel it, will be cut thinner. And you'll start to see why it's called round steak, because it is. This is a preferred method, but slicing you'll find will work better. Now venison, because it hasn't got a lot of fat, will never really set 100% like beef or lamb will, so it's always going to tend to run around on you a little bit. Keep the knife fairly sharp, it will work alright. We'll come back up to the top end of that. Got a bit of kneecap and that there, a small piece. We'll just put that aside for mince. We'll clean that up in a minute. So there we have the round steak. It comes up really well. What I do with this, We get a meat hammer, give it a bit of a flatten out with a meat hammer into some plain flour, then in beaten egg and a nice coating of dried breadcrumbs with whatever seasoning you fancy. We use an all-purpose seasoning, bit of mint, mixed herbs, whatever you fancy use, and into a pan with a bit of oil. Comes up quite very well. I'll sit him aside for packaging later. We've got the off cut off the side of it, which we'll just clean up a bit to go in the mince. Now the quality of mince is going to vary depending on the time you take to clean the sinew and off what you do. A little bit of fat left in it won't hurt it. I'll just knock that up in pieces and we'll run through a mincer. That depends how small you cut it, depends on the size of your mincer. Then we'll go into my bucket down here to go in the mince. Now we've got the top side. I've also heard this called a flat roast. Top side would be the correct name for a beef cut. Bit the same again, a little bit of trim and clean up. The sinew. And a little dry surface there can come off. A little bit of vein. And that's about ready. Now that is a prime roast. With any game, you just cannot afford to really overcook it, so watch your cooking times. And with these venison roasts, I generally put them in an oven bag with some of your favourite seasonings. French onion soup's a good one, some people like a bit of red wine. A little bit of water, not too much. You can put bacon rashers over it as it's cooking. Maybe even a dash of your favourite olive oil just to maintain the moisture in it, and that'll come up quite well. Then the juices that come out of the bag can be used to make a really good gravy. Now that can be cut into roast whatever size you require. That's what we'll do with that one. We got a family of 4. They will shrink a bit. We'll probably cut 3 out of this. This can also be used as steak, topside steak, which is often what you'll get in the butcher as a pepper steak. Or it could be cut and sliced thinly into cuts for likes of stir fry. Ideal for that. And another thing it's very good for, and a venison is especially good for, is jerky. Jerky can't really afford to have any fat in it, because as it's drying the fat will go rancid. So that's why game meats are ideal for making jerky, because there is very little fat in them. Once again, the top side, that would be an ideal cut for that. We've got the silver side. We've got a bit of vein and sinew on the inside here to clean out. bit of a trim up. And we'll show the actual two parts of the silver side as we do once we've done that. You can see there we've got the tongue of the silver side, comes down quite obvious. If you feel you want to, you can remove that separately and deal with it separately as a cut on its own. It doesn't make any difference. But what I do with this, I actually pump it and corn it for it would be corned meat. I'll leave that in the whole piece to do that. And I prepared a brine earlier. We might do that right while we're on the job. Now the brine consists of basically a commercial corning powder that same as your butcher uses, and that's where I get it. I just go to my local butcher and apply that and mix it according to the directions on the packet with just plain cooking salt. And the only thing I do differently, I put about 4 teaspoons of ground cloves in the mix, because I just reckon it adds nicely to the flavour. Now I've got my brine mixed up here in a bucket I prepared earlier. You'll find these buckets around second-hand stores and things. They've actually been a bucket that was used for a red curry paste, so it's a food grade plastic. Plastic is best because the salt in the brine will send most, unless it's stainless steel, it'll send it quite rusty. And all I do with that, with my pump, we just go and pump the brine into that cup. Just up in the end of the grain. Pump the brine into it. You can't over pump it. It will swell up quite a bit. As I said before, anything that will inject fluid can be used to do this. This was homemade by a friendly fitter and turner out of stainless steel. But if you go to catering supplies, you'll find small brine pumps available there. Nothing mystical or magical about it. It's all pretty straightforward. Now off larger animals or stags that you're a bit dubious about the quality of the cuts, you can pickle the whole lot, whole back leg, the round top side as well. It all makes perfectly good corned meat. And the actual pickling process will help tenderise it, and when it's cooked it's actually boiled slowly for a number of hours. It makes really good sandwich meat. And I've got that pretty well pumped. That just goes straight back into the brine. And I'll give that a stir every day. With about 3 days, it can be cut into the required size of pieces and your uncle. Right, next we'll deal with the rump. As I said, it's not a very big cut. There's a bit of fat on here. Once again, we'll remove the large portion of that. A bit of a clean up. It is fairly solid fat. Set that aside. A little bit more sinew on the outer. We're trimming the clean up. We've basically got the rump. Now that can be left in a piece for a roast, or that can be sliced. Once again, we've basically got the length of the muscle and the grain in here. You can see the grain running lengthways. We're going to slice it across the grain for steak. Just as such. In more or less in two pieces, your rump. We'll just slice that once again, not too thinly, so it doesn't dry out. Being grilled or barbecued or roasted. Down to the tail, there's a bit of trim there for mince once again. That's once again one of the better cuts off animal. Now we've got the shin meat to deal with. Now this does have a fair bit of sinew in it. It's basically in 2 or 3 pieces. We're just going to divide that up a bit. Now we've got this fairly thick sinew layer on the outer side. As before, knife against the bench. I'm going to run some of that off in separate pieces. Now the shin meat, as with beef, is probably one of the most flavoursome cuts off the animal. Ideal for stews and casseroles. Or you can take more of the sinew out of it and put it through in mince. It depends on your preferences of what you most use. A lot of people use a lot of mince. It's quick and convenient. That can be just sliced into steaks. For stewing, braising, casseroles. Diced up into a stew for the camp oven and up the bush. Really good on a cold winter's night. And again, with a little bit of tail in there, we can trim up into mince. But there's the shin meat, gravy beef, if you will. Once again, another piece that can be sliced into steak, or we can take some of the sinew out of it. As I said, there's a lot of sinew in the shin meat. And if you're going to use it for mince, the more time you spend taking sinew out, the better the end product. We also make our own sausages, and this could be quite well go into that as well. Just divide these up, the sections of the muscle, and peel the sinew out of it as best you can. Once again, the sinew down onto the board, enough to get a grip on it, wide away, and just run that off. Sinew, you get rid of a reasonable amount of it that way. Diced up in the mince. a little bit of practice and this becomes fairly easy. Take some of the heavier sinew out of it. And a good sharp mincer will deal with it fairly well. We've got a bit of trim that was off the bottom end of the round steak. Once again, it's just a matter of trimming her up. Remove the sinew with the fat. Absolutely prime minced meat. Various bits and pieces, quick trim. Into the mince as well. That's about it for the back leg. We'll start shortly on the front leg. Right, we've got the front leg. Once again, I've already scanned the leg back to pick up a tendon to hang it. Now the tendon for the front leg is actually on the front part of the leg, just below the knee. You can see the tendon which comes up on the front of the bone. I'll use that for a hanging point. Hang him up. Now, as before, it's a bit of a minor clean up, it's fairly good. Although this one we've got a bullet wound here, we'll have to deal with as we go through it. Make sure we don't have any lead or copper in the finished product. It's a matter of skinning him again. Work our way around the edges. A bit of pressure helps bring it off. We'll pull off to a fair degree, a little bit of knife work. And quite often, as I said, this has got some damage from a bullet wound. More often than not, there'll be a lot more than that. With percentage of animals will be shoulder shot. This was shot As we seen earlier, fairly high shoulder, low neck if anything. There's not a lot of damage in the shoulder. It's clear. A bit of hair about it. Now we've got a little bit here we'll take off. Just to tidy the front of the cut up. That can go into a stew or mince, as will largely a fair bit of the blade part of the leg does. A bit more trim up with the fat around the front here while we've got him hanging. But most of the cut up on the front leg is done on the bench. Not looking too bad. A little bit dry there. Trim to come off. And there we'll go onto the bench. Now once again we've got a portion of muscle across the top here. We'll remove that. Basically just skin that back off. There's a seam there as you can see. A bit more trim. A little bit of the bush about the place. A little bit of hair, but it's fairly good. Now what we're going to do, as we come down, you can see the veins running down the inside of the leg. You can feel with your thumb, you'll feel the joint. The leg bone runs from the elbow to the top of the blade. The blade is located here. We're going to find that joint just with a knife. It's fairly easy to find. Where it actually comes up to the part of the leg bone. See there, I've just cracked that joint, the end of the joint there. And we're going to work our way down the top of the blade. You can feel the edge of the blade from the point back here, runs up around the minor seam there. We're not going to cut too deeply here, it's relatively shallow. And we're basically going to take the meat off the top surface of the shoulder blade itself. And as you go, you feel your way down, you'll find the edge of the blade. Expose the blade as we go. Start to see that exposed surface there. We're going to work that back clean off the bone. Top edge of the blade is up here, right where we took it off. Trim to go into the mince. Once again, that has got a bit of damage in it, where the bullet's passed through, just missing the edge of the blade. Top of the blade's run fairly, mostly cartilage. We'll just peel off that as well, without actually cutting into the cartilage part of the blade itself. Now we're going to follow the edges of the blade, which are becoming evident. We're just going to go in around the edge of that, not too deeply. Basically just mark it out both sides. Lay it back a little bit. basically the thickness of the blade, which isn't much for a start, and then right back down to the joint. We're going to open that joint up like such. From there we're going to run down the top of the bone. As I said, there's the end of the bone there to the knee, thereabouts. There's a white veiny sinew there. I'll actually take this bit of trim off so you can see it a bit better. A bit more trim for the mince. The bone runs in down here. Let's run the knife down into the top of the bone. You'll feel it as you go. Around the head of the joint. And we're exposing the bone which runs down. We're just going to work our way around the bone. Just taking the muscle off the bone. Connecting sinews, etc. Now in off the bone here, we've got basically a spur that runs back to the point of the knee, if you like, which is at the back there. You can feel it quite well. We're going to work our way around that. We don't really want to cut right through here, we just work our way around the bone. Here's some fairly heavy sinew connected there. And then once again, up the bone, you can see the line of the bone. We can bone it back, the muscle back off it. What we're aiming to do is to remove the bone out of all this piece and leave it in one. You can see the spur of bone I was talking about protruding here. Get well in behind that. Work our way around in under the bone altogether. Sinews dried out a bit where it's been hung, got quite hard. Once again, it's a bit awkward working for the camera, but we'll lift the bone out of the meat. We'll separate the actual blade from the leg bone. We'll leave the blade intact at the moment. Got that free. Basically we've got it laid out as we took the bone out of it. Now we're going to work in round. Make sure that's properly free around in under the edge of the blade. As you can see, it's not terribly thick, the blade. Repeat the same this side. Well, this edge is a little bit wider. at that stage we'll turn it over. Now we've got the white line here, that's down the centre of the blade. It's like a spine running up the back of the other side of the blade. We're going to find that and just run the knife neat down either side of it, out to the bottom. As you can see, there's the surface of the bone there. We'll come out the bottom of the cut and bone it back off the side of that blade. Will come off relatively cleanly. And then same on the other side. Once again, bring it back off the blade. Here we are to the width of the blade where we were a bit earlier. That's the blade free. There's the rib on the blade I was referring to, and a softer cartilage at the top. Now returning to the flip side. Two pieces of blade, we've got this smaller piece which we'll take off, basically straight out to where the knee was. More or less a triangular muscle. This has got a bit of surrounding tissue and sinew attached. We'll peel that off. Bit of a clean up. I'll set that aside for mince again. Trim. There's a blade steak. Got to be sliced up for stewing, for running the mince. If it has been shoulder shot properly, you might find a fair bit that's damaged, and we'll just trim it up and it will largely become mince. Now what we have here, you can see that this is the larger piece of the blade, runs where the bone was. There's a seam runs down in under the through here. There's a seam running down. Follow it through. Off through about the joint and down where we took the bone out of. It's the larger part of the blade steak. Once again, a bit of a trim up. Excess sinew and fat. And that one then be sliced for steak. Of a young animal, could be roasted, or it could go into mince or sausages, whatever you fancy. Now we've got this is the other part of the blade. We've got a bit of bullet damage here. We'll endeavour to cut out of it. It's not too great because it hasn't actually hit bone, so there's not a lot of damage there. But we'll give that a pretty good trim. Next we'll just talk about lead and copper. It's a piece of lead. Anything that looks a bit tough at all we'll discard for pet meat. Another minor seam through there will divide that. This is more or less a piece of skirt. Top end of the flank, if you will. And we'll just clean that up. That can be sliced into stewing meat, or can go into mince as well. That's the other main part of the blade. Once again, do a trim up. And that can be sliced into steak, stewing steak, braised or casseroles. And as we've done with the back strap, when I slice that, I'll start in the middle. We'll just go through that sinew. Now there is a second layer of like cartilage through this cut. That will stay in place. We go through to that outer layer of sinew and peel it off. Finish up. Now we sliced in the blade steak. As I said, there is a layer of sinew through the middle of this cut, which is perfectly normal, and that's how it would be presented, just as steak like that. Be diced up into a stew or casserole. A bit of heavy sinew there we can remove. A bit of trim into the mince. Now we'll deal with the main part of the blade. Once again, you slice him up in the steak, trim off the end, a bit of a cleaner up, and once again cutting across the grain. As I said, the grain generally runs lengthways on most muscles, with the connective tissue and tendon on the joint. It runs up and down the muscle. Once again, braising, stewing casseroles. If you don't use a lot of that, it can be run into mince. It could also have the outer sinew removed and probably make reasonable stir fry of a young animal, or as I said, roasted. Down to the last. A little bit more trim. The third and smaller part. This smaller piece cut into steak. It can be on the younger animal grilled or fried. You can see very little or no fat in those cuts. Tidbit for more mince. And the remaining piece, once again, it can be just sliced into stewing steak, or it can be cleaned up and go through into mince. It depends on your preference of what you will use your most of. For steak, it just be simply sliced once again across the grain. And these lower, once again, shin meat is very flavoursome. This will just be cleaned up. That can be sliced for stewing meat. A large portion of this will be sinew taken out for mince. Once again, it's the sinew down, the grip on it. You've got to peel a lot of that off. A bit time consuming, but once again, the time spent doing it adds to the finished product. Dice that up. I'll put that into mince. Could still be used for stewing.